Hey, we're Flick and Joe, and this is our dog Walter. In 2022, we made the crazy decision to quit our full-time jobs, pack up our lives, and move aboard our blue water sailing boat. We spent many months refitting her and getting her ready for our plans until one day we actually did it. We cast off the lines, we pointed her south, and off we went. We've now sailed over 1,000 nautical miles, dodging orcas, yes, actually, and most of the rocks along the way. Join us for the beautiful, quite stressful, but endlessly eventful life that is full-time living aboard.
Hello there! Today's morning job. Today's morning job is to fix the our windlass because we've lost functionality. Well, half of the functionality. We can raise the anchor up, but we can't let it down. One of the buttons is broken, so I'll show you. So to control the windlass, we've got two buttons. We've got a black button, red button. Red button lets it down, but it's clearly, I'm pressing this, it's not working. Black button pulls it out, as you can see there. So today's job is to try and fix this red button. What do I think is wrong with it? Well, I think maybe, you see, this has got there's a switch inside here that's protected by this rubber squishy button, and it's cracked all around the edge. It's cracked on top, and I think what's happened is water has got inside here and it's corroded the connection. I'm gonna have to take this switch off, take it apart, and see what I can see inside there. I've got replacement buttons, but looking at the replacement, I don't think you can really service these. You can't take the switch apart, so if something has died inside the switch, then we just need to get a new one. Something we can do though is to check the wiring under here. So in the windlass, we've got a little junction box here. So this is the wires from both of the switches, junction box which activates a relay, which then activates windlass. As always with boat jobs, this involves a bit of boat yoga. Quite an uncomfy position.
So I inspected all of the electrical connections inside this junction box, and I couldn't really see any obvious reason why the switch wouldn't be working. So the next step was to take this switch off, take out the screws, have a look at the inner workings of the switch and see whether we could diagnose the problem.
Just taking the switch off. This is the old switch. You can see it's super simple in how it's designed. So this red switch has a little metal plate at the back, pushes down, and it just makes contact between these two metal plates. And that completes the circuit. That's your switch. And then there's a spring which just pushes the rubber switch back up. But this, I've already started to clean it up a little bit, but this contact was just covered in corrosion. So I think that's the problem. That's why the switch isn't working. The replacement works in a different way. So that inside there is this little plastic box. There's a little switch and it clicks. So that goes like that. And that'll be our new switch. I guess this I could clean up and put this new piece of rubber in to keep it waterproof, because the problem is this water got in here and that's why it's got ruined. But this doesn't have a mechanism for holding the metal plate. This button has a little sort of pouch to hold the metal plate. But yeah, I think I'm going to clean this up and keep this one as a spare, but I'm going to install the new ones.
So I decided to remove the other switch as well, even though it is still working, just because it makes sense to kill two birds with one stone. Otherwise, in a couple of months' time, we might have the black switch breaking and we'd be back here all over again. now that I had both switches removed, I did a little bit of surface prep. So I removed the old sort of silicone or Sikaflex sealant and tried to make a clean surface to apply the new switches. So my original plan here was to drill out the small screw holes and the holes where the wiring went through the deck, and then fill them with epoxy and then drill them back out again. Unfortunately, whilst drilling them out, I discovered something I did not want to find.
So drilling these out is what I feared could happen here. Is we have a rot problem. So the wood, this is balsa core deck, and these holes were sealed with a tiny bit of Sikaflex type stuff. And this one had Sikaflex in it, but it's not enough, and it looks like these screw holes are the things that have leaked. And all of this, I've started to scrape it out, but this is just mushed. The wood is all just falling out as I prod around. This bit actually looks strong over here, but then this bit is not. It's the screw holes. The screw holes are really bad. I think this may have actually had a previous repair. This might already be filled with epoxy. But this is what happens when you don't drill, over drill, fill with epoxy and then re-drill it. You have a rot problem now. It's just frustrating, because what's supposed to be a small, easy job is now turning into a bigger job, which is always the way, I guess. Okay, I've resorted to multi-tooling it, cutting it open so we can see what the real damage is here. So here we go, it's coming. So it's pretty rotten. Somebody's filled that with epoxy at some point. But they didn't do it with the screw holes. So here we are, just digging out rot. This kind of sucks. This is just mushy wood. You know, it's not offering any structural strength. So I think in terms of a fix, it's probably just going to fill this with thickened epoxy and it will be okay. But first we've got to get all the rot out. And then I might treat it with some vinegar, white vinegar, because white vinegar is really good anti-rot, natural anti-fungus. So I pour some white vinegar in here to kill all the rot, then let it dry out, and then fill it with epoxy. Oh, this was supposed to be such a quick and easy job, and here I am about half an hour later, and I'm just about finished digging out the rot. So let me show you the damage. Yep, pretty decent pile of rot. Some bits are better than others. It's not totally, it's not total smush. You can squeeze the water out of it though. But this has been slowly rotting. My fingers are wet from touching it. So what I've done is, with my handy dandy screwdriver, I've tried as best as I can to dig around as deep as I can go in all directions to basically remove any rotten wood. And as you can see, yeah, a little bit more there. It's just really soft. It breaks free like effortlessly. It's probably around about here. Round about here is where the wood starts to get harder. what we're gonna have to do now is just let it dry out for a couple days. And I think I'll probably treat it with some white vinegar, which is a really powerful antifungal. Pour some white vinegar into the hole, let it soak into the wood, and then let it dry out again, bone dry. Give it a good few days, as long as we can really, and then I can fill it full of epoxy and maybe some wood as well to fill in some of the voids. And yeah, then I can replace the little fiberglass skin that I've cut off. I can put that back in place, and it doesn't have to look pretty because this is ultimately, it's going to be hidden, right? It's going to be hidden under the button, the mess that I've now made on the deck. So I'm not too worried about it looking pretty again because it'll be hidden. On the other hole, this one, somebody's already at some point filled a lot of this with a thickened epoxy type material, but they didn't do a complete job. So all of the section down here, probably down to follow my finger, this is all now empty. I've taken all the wood out of this because yeah, it was pretty rotten. Hello. So it's the evening now, or early evening. The windlass switch was this morning's fun discovery. Well, what I've done today is just let it dry out. Let it dry out as best as I can. And then I've sort of got a little syringe here, filled it full of white vinegar and injected it into various pieces of the balsa core in the hope that it kills off any of the fungus that is causing the rot, because rot is just a fungus. White vinegar is a very strong antifungal. And now I've filled the holes full of epoxy, which I'll show you in a sec. So this is my thickened epoxy, which has been filled with some of the, cordia silica stuff, but also lots of chopped up pieces of fiberglass sheet. I was really worried about the epoxy not curing in time for the evening or overnight dew, and well, I kind of messed up in that sense, because the epoxy is cured unbelievably quick because of the sunlight that is still shining, beating down on us, even though it's 6:10 in the evening. But also it's just a really big batch of epoxy, so it's creating its own heat, which is like speeding up the process, like it's an exothermic reaction. So anyway, it's curing very quickly, and it's not ideal because it's basically bubbling. This is our epoxy, and it started to slow down now, but all of this around here, which is where it is filled the void, this is hot, but not too hot. I can touch it. So at least the epoxy is cured. I'm not too worried about it being like, because it's got, I don't know, you guys tell me on the internet of wisdoms, but the epoxy getting too hot and curing too quickly, does that affect its structural integrity? I'm not overly worried if it does, because this isn't really a structural part of the boat, and it's very strong naturally anyway, because there's a corner, and there's also a bulkhead right underneath it. So yeah, I'm not overly worried, but I'm interested to know if epoxy curing too quickly, does it have any downsides? I'm guessing that it must, because you know, the epoxy now has got little bubbles in it. What I've also done is, underneath the ankle locker here, I've taken out a piece of skin. So moving down, I've cut out a very small square or rectangle of the fiberglass skin here, and that's just to let the wood breathe from the bottom. My logic with that is that But what it'll do is it'll allow the wood, the balsa core, to breathe, and so hopefully get rid of any of the residual moisture that is still in the deck, because I've only discovered this rot today and I've only opened up and given it time to dry for about 10 hours. So obviously I know full well that the deck will not be dry, the balsa core will not be dry, it will still have moisture trapped in there. Any moisture at all that is trapped in there isn't good because, well, it's trapped. So what it'll do is it'll just rot one piece of wood. Once that bit of wood is rotted away, the water will trickle onto the next piece of wood, rot that, and it'll just keep going because it can never escape because it's trapped inside this sandwich, fiberglass sandwich deck. Why am I rushing this job? Well, every day that we don't have a windlass operating, it kind of makes me feel a bit insecure about life. Because we're not in a rush to leave this anchorage, but if anything happened in the night or in the daytime and we needed to lift the anchor, we're not going to be able to do it particularly quickly now because we don't have a windlass that's working because the switches don't work. Yes, I could jewelry rig the switches up, but there's a risk that we just damage them or the chain gets tangled in the cables. It's just not ideal. So I'm trying to get it fixed as soon as we can. And the other thing that's influencing this decision is that on Wednesday, which is in 3 days now, I have to fly home because my granny's really poorly. So I'm going to go see my granny. And that means that I'm leaving Flick and Walter on the boat on their own, which they've never done before. And so I want to make sure that before I leave, I want to make sure that they can lift the anchor and drop the anchor if they need to. They're not planning on because they're just going to sit in this anchorage and chill, but still, you never know what can happen on a boat. So we really want to have that option there if we need it. Today is turning into one of those mornings. Well, it's now the afternoon, so that tells you how well the morning has gone. But I've sanded back my epoxy from yesterday, and then I've sort of faired it out again, so put another layer of epoxy. That has now cured, and I've just drilled my holes. So I'll show you where I'm at now. So, nice and smooth finish. Yes, it looks messy, but it will be hidden. It will be under the buttons. Like that, so it'll look good as new. Drilled my 4 screw holes, and then these bigger holes are for the cables to slot through. Drilling one of these holes, I snapped my drill bit, which is really annoying. This tiny little drill bit. I just need to drill pilot holes for the screws, and yeah, I snapped it. So then I had to try and drill it out, which was a pain. And then backfill the hole with epoxy and then re-drill it again. So it's been one of those mornings. But we're there now, so we can fit the switches, screw them in place, and then I'm going to wire them up. That's 1, 2,
So you'll notice that I fitted the switches sideways. So I did this so that when you open the switches, they don't open into the void where the anchor locker is. Because occasionally the lid of the anchor locker will slam down and they might snap the little plastic lids to the switches. The eagle-eyed amongst you will also notice that I applied a little bit of sealant as well, which is what I'm clearing up here. And that's just to make sure that these switches stay perfectly watertight and we can get the maximum life out of them possible.
1 button installed. Beep. Let's do the next one. And that's that. Up and down. That went so smoothly, so that's really refreshing because today has not been a smooth day. Now my and my down burn beautifully installed. I can, well, the anchor doesn't work right now because they're not wired in. So the next step is to do the wiring. For that, I need to go find the heat gun. So the heat gun is just adamant that it doesn't want to work today. I plugged this guy in, it does absolutely nothing. I mean, earlier it was working if I gave this little cable a little wiggle. And so I'm guessing this is the culprit. So I'm gonna have to take the thing apart and see what the connection's like, maybe cut back the cable and rewire it. Just one more job to add to the list. That's all the screws out. Okay, green wire goes to blue. Light brown goes to dark brown. And it's a tiny little resistor that goes between the two. So I'm just going to chop the cable, rewire it. It's going to lose this thing to protect the chafe and protect the cable bending. But you see it's been bending right here. This is really weak. This rubber is really soft and the cable bends really easily there. So I think the copper is broken here. Oh yeah, this cable is toast.
After fixing the heat gun, I then got to work re-establishing all of the electrical connections so that we can test on new switches.
Lots of beautiful connections now. I just need to, I've got some additional heat shrink. I did a boo-boo. I've just heat shrinked all of my cables. I've made nice, beautiful connections, but do you know what I haven't done? I didn't push them through the sidewall. I didn't push them through the grommet here. So now when I go to close the box, it's just gonna crunch the cables. I'm so stupid. Okay, the windlass is finally installed. I haven't bothered to didn't bother to show you me cutting all the cables and reconnecting them because you've already seen me do that once and you don't need to see it again. But I will show you the finished product now. So obviously you got your buttons and boom, up, down, and all of the cabling is in this junction box up here. And it's been cable tied over here and here, the excess cable, and I've routed the switch wires so they go in through the side, so they go through a little gland and it's more waterproof, and this is all closed and wedged in place. And yeah, that's it, we're done. So that is a job pating ticked. Now I've just got to put all the tools away, tidy up, and yeah, I'm gonna have myself a beer.